In this video, we're talking about my 10 favorite poses for wedding photography. So without further ado, let's get into the first pose, and that is what I call facing each other. The important thing about this pose, about facing each other, is having zero gaps between the hips. This gets them really close, conveys that intimacy, that emotion, that feeling like the couple is in love. So the key to this is having the groom wrap both arms around the bride's waist and pulling her in really, really tight. And then you'll have the bride's hands around either the groom's neck or on his chest or around his arms. Just basically, again, you want to have every hand of the couple engaged with the other person. That way there's nothing just kind of stray and dangling there. As far as the head and facing each other goes, you want to have them forehead to forehead. And then once you get everything pretty much dialed in, you can just kind of leave the pose as is and focus on the lighting and the composition, and also kind of giving some cues for some natural emotions. And then you just kind of slightly rotate them or move them side to side as necessary to dial in the shot. The next pose is almost kissing. So for this one, you want to direct the couple to get in as close as possible for a kiss, but not quite yet. Don't quite kiss. Again, the same rules apply. You want to make sure the groom's hands and arms are wrapped around his bride. And then for the bride, you can either put her hands either just right on his cheek right here, or pulling him around the neck in for that kiss. One thing to really watch out though for is the placement of the person's noses, especially for the person that you're trying to showcase in the shot. So typically I prefer to have the best light shown on the bride's face, which would mean I need to show more of her face, so I usually instruct the bride to have her nose closer to the camera. And just a quick note before I move on to the next pose, while all the examples and tips in this video will be described for a traditional bride and groom couple, these tips pretty much work for any type of couple, any shape or size, including same-sex couples, except in that case you'd actually have the benefit and the freedom to choose which individual you'd like to showcase. On to the next pose. So the next one is walking across the frame. So for this pose, basically you'll have the couple walk in a line across the frame perpendicular to where your camera is pointed. I always tell the couple to have one person lead the other, usually like 2 to 3 steps ahead of the other person that they'll be leading. Strategically, you're going to want to have them hold the hands so that their bodies will be facing toward the camera rather than away from the camera, and remind them to look around how they would actually walk. So instead of walking like looking at each other locked in the whole time, not minding your surroundings, have them actually look around, look down, look at each other, converse a little bit, look back at each other again. Just natural. Keep it natural, because again, the goal here is really to make sure that it doesn't really look posed and looks more candid. And if you do not remind them of this, I guarantee they're mistakenly going to walk with their eyes locked on the entire time, and that is a dead giveaway of a premeditated and posed shot. So next up is walking towards the camera. So this one's really similar, except this time they'll be walking toward the camera, obviously, and you can have them either walk side by side or one leading the other, just like the previous option. It really is up to you. Again, make sure to remind them to look naturally, look at their surroundings, converse with each other, and look back at each other once in a while, kind of giggling, laughing, that kind of thing. But instruct them to forget about you and to not look at the camera. Since they're going to be walking toward you, they're going to have the tendency to like look at the camera and smile as they're walking, and it just doesn't look good at all. It also helps a teeny bit if you have them have a little bit of gap of separation in between when they're holding hands. That way it just kind of aesthetically makes it a little bit more pleasing. Alright, so side by side. This pose is really, really straightforward. You have the couple stand side by side with a slight gap in between and holding their hands right down straight in the middle. And again, that gap is really important because it's going to accentuate that grasp in between of holding their hands, and it gives a little nice like even gap on each side. Always make sure to watch the body language of both individuals. Make sure it's both relaxed and confident. So for this, it actually means having the bride kind of kick out their weight to one hip or the other, just so that they can avoid locking their knees. And with this pose, it's actually super versatile. You can actually have like 3 different shots. You can have them looking at each other, looking away, and then looking straight at the camera, either smiling or not smiling. So I guess that's kind of like 4 looks. And then you can throw in different camera angles. You can get high, you can get low, you can get off to the side, you can have different focal lengths. And this is really going to add a ton of variety at your fingertips without minimal kind of shifts to the flow of the shoot. Okay, so next up is what I call the hero silhouette. So the hero silhouette is actually very similar to the side-by-side pose, with the exception that it is a silhouette. So you're going to purposely underexpose the shot. But when you underexpose the shot, they're just going to be a bunch of shadows, right? So in order to avoid the couple looking like a big shadowy blob, you're going to want to exaggerate their body positioning and limb positioning. So you're going to want to have their feet spread apart. You're going to want to have their arms have like a little bit of wind window in between the side of their arm and their body so that the light shines through and you can kind of see their forms. And then you're also going to want them to kind of exaggerate looking over their shoulder as much as possible so that you can see the profile of their nose. That's really, really important to making sure to get a very clean and kind of iconic hero silhouette shot. So next up is the intimate silhouette. And the intimate silhouette is very, very similar to the very first pose that I shared with you, facing each other. But instead, you're actually going to want to have the couple kind of touch their foreheads first and then separate ever so slightly just to let that light peek in. If their foreheads are touching, it's not really going to be the end of the world, but if you separate it, it just gives more clarity and overall kind of quality to the silhouette. It's something you can't really describe, but when you see it visually, it makes a lot of sense. Always play around with different kind of framing devices or surrounding elements that are shadows to kind of make your composition more interesting, as the kind of pose itself isn't very, I guess, unique or different that much. So it's really going to be accentuating the overall surroundings, the color of the sunset, that kind of thing. Okay, so next up is the camera aware shot. This is just the classic camera aware shot, prom pose, whatever you like to call it. This one is super obvious, but a camera aware shot is something that I always get because more often than not, the family of the couple is going to purchase this as a print. It's always going to be this one, I promise you. So even if you're vibing, you're in that creative flow, be sure to grab at least one camera aware shot during the entire portrait shoot. If you don't, most likely the couple will be upset, or at least their parents will be upset, and you're gonna have to kind of answer back. I don't know. I just don't want you to be in that position. And the real truth is you can take any of these poses, at least the non-silhouette poses, and tweak them into a camera aware shot by just asking the couple to look at you. Some things to kind of step up the level of your camera aware shots and make sure, again, all the hands are engaged. They're embracing each other, hand on the chest, around their waist, around their shoulders, or whatever you need to them to do, and have them smile at you, kind of laugh a little bit. And also don't be afraid to let them relax their face every now and then, because once you're smiling for a long time, it gets really tiring and then it starts to end up not looking as good. But if you let them relax their face and re-smile, it'll kind of bring some energy back in the shot if you need to fix some things or you had a few test shots and you didn't get it on the first try. Alright, so the second to last pose is sitting. And sitting is always actually kind of tough because when you're executing this, most people tend to sit naturally, and that means sinking all the way inside the chair, and that's not really flattering. To combat this, you're going to have the couple sit kind of toward the edge of the bench or the chair so that their butts are on the very, very, very edge. What this allows them to do is to not look slouched over and to have better posture, and also more freedom to kind of move and twist toward each other so that they can kind of get closer to each other. I tend to try to have either a couple's foreheads closer together, kind of leaning in, whispering to the other person, or maybe having them kind of like lean on one shoulder. In general, just kind of feel it out, and also take note of any weird body language, as sitting sometimes can have them contorting their bodies in weird ways, and you really don't want that at all. So don't force it too much. Sitting is probably one of the most challenging positions that I ever put couples in, but experiment with it, and again, make sure to have their butts really, really on the edge. And the last pose, last but not least, but probably one of my favorites, is the hugging from behind pose. This is a great pose when you have some strong directional light. Basically, what you're going to do is have the groom hug the bride from behind, and the bride is going to actually face her body away from the light and then kind of look back ever so slightly so that the light just kind of like edge highlights the contours of her face, and it looks super, super good, especially with strong directional light. And the key here is she doesn't have to look all the way back at him with her eyes. It's just kind of like looking over to the side right here, a little bit flirty, like I can hear you there, but I'm not going to look all the way at you. That's kind of the vibe that you want to get. If he can whisper into her ear, that helps to kind of give some impromptu emotion and naturalness to the shot. Another thing, a really, really key thing about this shot is to have the groom hug around the arms at the upper arms if possible, because if you hug around the waist, you're really going to run the risk of this shot looking like a maternity portrait when the couple is going to be having a baby. And that's something you want to really make sure you communicate the correct thing, that this is an engagement or wedding portrait or a couple portrait and not a maternity portrait. But hey, if you do a good job, maybe down the road they'll hire you for that maternity shot down the road. But let's not count our chickens before they hatch. Is that how you say it? I don't know. Count the eggs? I don't know. So again, hug around the top and not around the waist. That is a big takeaway for me and something that I learned early on. Never try to make that mistake ever again. So that wraps up my 10 favorite wedding photography poses. You can also use these for engagement shoots, couple shoots, whatever you need to. If you have any questions or need any clarifications on the poses that I shared, please let me know down in the comments below. A lot of you have trouble with posing. I want to help you with that, so let me know down in the comments. If you want to shadow me and see me how I execute these poses in a real world shoot and actually hear how I'm directing the couple, what's going on through my head, I highly encourage you to check out my full behind the scenes shoot, link up above, also down in the description below. You're not going to want want to miss that, because it's going to teach you kind of exactly how I talk to them and show you how to do it. It's the closest thing you have to just actually shadowing me in the field. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like down below. It really does help. And as always, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, as I make a new Fujifilm or photography video every single week. But if that's too long, please be sure to follow me on Instagram at ReggieBPhoto, as I'm posting new tips, tricks, and tutorials throughout the week. Really, if you're not following me on Instagram, your photography is going to be lacking. I'm not even lying about this. Follow me right now. You're going to get a lot of gems, a lot of knowledge. Just do it. Alright, that's it for me. Remember to get out, go shoot, and I'll catch you all in the next one.